Welcome to this fifth session of Peace Talks from Citizens for Peace with a lot of support from Mahindra, who have been very generous to us. Peace Talks is an attempt by Citizens for Peace to provide a forum to discuss sensitive issues and in a spirit of dialogue, in a spirit of peace, you might say. We search also during these peace talks for ways forward, both for us and for our country. Today we have with us Dr. Ganesh Devy and Dr. S. Parasuraman. Dr. Devy is the founder and the director of the Tribal Academy in Tejgarh in Gujarat, and he's been very concerned for a long time with tribal issues and particularly languages. And Dr. Parasuraman is the director of the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Dr. Devy, among others, have pointed out that languages really don't die. In a sense, they are killed off. And to illustrate this, our census in 1961 listed over 1,600 mother tongues in this country of ours. But in 1971, we decided to count only the languages that more than 10,000 people spoke. And that resulted in only 108 mother tongues being listed. So what happens to the speakers of those other 1,500 languages which are effectively de-recognized by the state in a sense? Are they effectively silenced in our Indian democracy? Can democracy exist really if we are not able to tolerate this kind of diversity, if it kills diversity? Other questions that we must raise about the connections between this, if there are any, and the whole rise of the Maoist movement. So these are some of the questions I hope we can touch on today. And I'd like to invite Dr. Devy to speak to us.
Good evening, everybody. Since the flow of time cannot be stopped, we heard it said that you cannot stand in the same river twice. The water keeps flowing. This is true with languages as well. Languages change every day. If an expression like cool coffin meant for Milton the watery death of Lycidas, today it might mean to a youngster just a lovely cozy place to have a cup of coffee. Languages change every day. Languages change because languages are a repository of culture. And by culture, of course, we do not mean just those monuments, just those documents, just those practices, just those systems and structures. We also have a complex of cognitive categories, and that complex of cognitive categories is what makes culture, culture. And that is why Kal and Samay do not mean the same, and either of these do not mean the same as time in English. Culture changes, and memory of these cognitive categories is held by language. The memory of the cognitive categories is held together by language, and the togetherness of that memory makes a community a community. Languages change. They change naturally. But languages are not natural. They are a cultural product. They are not natural like that river flowing, but they are a cultural product. And it takes a long, long time for human beings to make words and to make sentences out of those words. It takes a pretty long time for human beings not just to talk about the present, but also to talk about the past. Many other animal species can talk about the present. A dog can bark and say some guest has come or I am hungry. But a dog can never say that once upon a time there was a king. To tell a lie, to talk about the past, and as a reflection to talk about the future is peculiarly human. To be human is to have language. Language is the most distinguishing mark for the human species, and without language one is only an animal and not a human being. It is said that at the beginning of the 19th century, there were about 8,000 languages in the world. It is said that in the middle of the 20th century, there were 6,000 languages in the world. About 2,000 languages have gone by without a trace anywhere. It is said that now we have only 4,000 languages with us, and the estimate is by the end of the 21st century, we will have hardly 200 languages surviving in conditions of cultural fitness. This is a huge genocidal, maybe I will call it phonocidal future pending for us, facing us. All this is happening not just because the greed of man is driving a market force, trying to homogenize, bringing cultures to a condition of facelessness. That of course is happening. That is the most important factor. The corporate agenda is the agenda of imposing the punishment of aphasia on all of us. But in a country like India, in a country like Ethiopia and Papua New Guinea, these are the three, Indonesia, these are 4 countries with maximum number of languages anywhere. Papua New Guinea has about 700, Indonesia has 600, according to UNESCO, India has only 500 languages. Countries like these are aiding the corporate agenda of bringing a homogeneity in culture and sentencing the world with aphasia. And let me in brief say how our country is aiding this genocidal or phonocidal present in which we are caught. At the beginning of the 19th century, some of the Indian languages were put to print. Marathi, which is the language of Maharashtra state, was printed for the first time in 1775. In 1802, in Calcutta, St. Fort Williams, a printing press was established by the British administration to print Indian languages, and texts were created. And everything that was written came to be counted as truth, and everything that was non-written came to be seen either as folk or non-truth or merely tradition. Scientifically speaking, there is no logical link between a script and a language. Any script can write any language of the world almost effectively. There are many languages that were written in several scripts. Sanskrit is a great example. It was written in 3 or 4 different scripts. And one single language, even today, like Kannada is being written, Konkani is being written in different scripts. Many mighty languages have not developed their own scripts at all, and the best known example is the English language, which does not have a script of its own. It is using the Roman script. Nobody invented an English script, not because there was poverty of imagination, but from the 19th century, beginning of the 19th century, in India, script became the basis of truth and authenticity, and therefore everything that was non-scripted became trashed. All the languages of the tribes and the nomadic communities, they came to be seen as mere mumbo jumbo, mere a garbage of nonsense verbal concepts, non-philosophical, non-substantive, burden of the past. After independence, only the languages that had scripts, that had printed literature in them, were given states, because in India we have linguistic states, and a list of 14 languages was made, which was added as a to the constitution as a schedule, the 8th schedule of languages. Today it has got 22. Whatever money the government spends on higher education or school education can be spent only on schools or colleges in those languages, which means for languages other than those 22, no government funding is available. And if government funding is not available, children have to study in some other language, livelihood becomes available in some other languages, and therefore one's mother tongue becomes a liability, a thing for which one should have a sense of shame. The state has aided the decline of these languages quite systematically. As Dilip mentioned a while ago, this after 1972, Bangladesh was created on the issue of language, and therefore 1971 census data, which was revealed for the which was released for the public towards the end of that decade, did not publish data related to languages spoken by less than 10,000. I gather now that the government of India has a plan of in future releasing only the data related to languages spoken by more than 25,000, which means even this figure of 108 will go down to about 40, maybe 35. I think we are systematically killing these languages. If you look at the surface of the earth, you notice that by the beginning of the 20th century, every 4,300 square miles had one language. Today, every 40,000 square miles has one language, and in future maybe 4 million square miles will have one language. And at that time, all the knowledge that these languages hold, all the wisdom about ecology that the languages have will have gone. In the Parliament of India, only 3% of Indian languages were ever heard in the last 60 years. If every language is a world view, then approximately 1600 world views were never heard by the Parliament of India, and therefore a strange kind of alienation has emerged between the political class, whichever party it belongs to, and the people of India who speak these languages. And I think that is not a good omen for a democracy. In such a situation, it is experienced in the past that societies turn to violence when their cultural identity is coercively taken away, when they are punished with aphasia. The example of Rome is well known. It is the people called barbaric, those who spoke what is called the vernaculars. They caused the destruction of Rome, and for good reasons. I think a violent society will be born, and people's violence then will be countered by the violence of the state, which is faceless and even more cruel, even more inhuman than the violence which is born out of a sentimentality about loss of culture. I think we are heading in that direction, and if we have to preserve peace, if we have to learn to be tolerant, which is the hallmark of a democracy, we will have to look at the question of speech again and remove the tyranny of the state and script and learn to respect speech and language. India must do it because India is one country in the world which has continuous history of spoken languages unbroken. And if we do not value it, if we do not learn to respect it, who else will do it? Not certainly those who are mooting the idea of a city which is a place of malls and halls.